Hey everyone, welcome to Introduction to Cognitive Science. I'm Adam, and the goal for this first lecture is to welcome you and introduce you to the course. Well, welcome everyone, I'm Adam, and I'm happy to be teaching you about cognitive science this summer. I'm a native of Redondo Beach, California, a veteran of the United States Air Force, and a first-generation graduate. I've worked in research labs at the University of Pennsylvania, UCSD, Columbia, and Yale, and I've published 24 articles across the cognitive sciences. I was awarded my PhD in linguistics in 2020, and I've been teaching cognitive science at UC Merced since then. I'm really happy to be here at Cal now, since I've been dreaming of teaching here for the last decade. Cal has played an important part in the history of cognitive science, and I'm honored and excited to be part of the intellectual community here. I hope you will learn a lot and enjoy studying the mind with me this summer. Info about the course is available on B Courses, so please familiarize yourself with the content on B Courses and continue to regularly check for course updates and announcements. I'm in the middle of moving from Merced to Berkeley, so my courses this summer will be offered asynchronously online. Fall courses will be on campus. Recorded lectures will usually be posted online by the scheduled lecture time. There may be times when I post the lecture later in the evening or a day early due to moving arrangements. So check the announcements for any updates about this. We're scheduled for 2.5 hours of lecture material each meeting, but I'll break down the recorded lectures into smaller parts, about 30 to 60-minute chunks. Each lecture meeting covers about 2 assigned readings, so I recommend completing the first lecture and reading, taking a break, and then completing the second lecture and reading. Summer moves fast, so it is especially important over summer sessions to stay on track with the readings and assignments. I respect your intelligence and work ethic, so in general, I will not do much hand-holding. This means that I expect all of you excellent students to manage your schedules well and submit all your work on time. Know that I'm here for you and that I want you to succeed. I've created the course so you can do well and enjoy your studies. So let me know what else I can do to assist you in your academic journey. Email me to set up office hours via Zoom. My email's croom@berkeley.edu. I'm looking forward to us having an excellent summer together. Now I just want to walk you through B courses to make sure that we're all familiarized with the location of course content. You see here we're at the home page for the course. Importantly, go to the file section, click on files, and you'll see the main folders for the course that have been posted so far. Okay, so information about the syllabus, click on this folder right here, click on this file, and you'll notice that all the information about the course, including the readings and the schedule, along with the grading criteria, is available here in the syllabus. Okay. There's introduction to what the course is about, outcomes for the course, grading procedures for our quizzes, our final paper, and our final presentation. And then our reading schedule, okay, our course schedule and reading schedule. Okay. I've broken this down into 2 separate schedules just so that it's easy for you to see in one pass. So you can see right here the course schedule, so you understand sort of the main focus for each day. Like, what are we doing on May 24th? We're going to focus on introducing the field of cognitive science. Okay, what are we doing on May 25th? we're going to focus on this interesting debate between nativism, empiricism, and the origins of knowledge. Okay, and so you can sort of understand each day as having a focal topic, and I've provided that for you here in the course schedule. Okay, so we'll go through language acquisition, spoken languages, and then we'll cover language acquisition part 2, sign languages. Then we'll cover syntax, then we'll cover semantics and pragmatics, and so on down the list. Okay, I've selected a nice variety of articles that cover the whole field, the spectrum of cognitive science. So this way we'll get familiarized with different approaches to the study of the mind. Notice also that I've highlighted when we're going to take our quizzes, and it's very easy to remember. We're taking quizzes every weekend, okay? And it's going to cover the readings for that week. So you'll notice, if I'll show you the sheet where I've uploaded the questions for you, but I've already uploaded questions to check your knowledge for the readings for this whole week. Okay, so you'll have week 1 questions, review the questions, then read through the articles and find the answers to those questions. And then by the time quiz 1's available for you, you'll have already carefully read the articles and found all the answers to the questions. The quiz will contain a subset of the questions that I've provided you from earlier in the week. Okay, so in the beginning of the week, I might give you a total of like 40 questions. And then on the quiz, there may be 30 questions, okay, worth a total of 50 points. Okay, I might also add a few extra questions in your quiz just to test your research skills. So it might say, look at this article and read figure 3 and tell me what the result is, something of that nature. Okay, so that's going to be our schedule. I'm going to, in the beginning of the week, give you questions to focus on. Then we'll go through the readings and the lectures together. And then at the end of the week, you'll have a couple days to complete your take-home quiz. Okay. As long as you're staying on track with the reading assignments, the quizzes should not be terribly difficult for you. Okay. Most students historically do really well in my courses. The only issue will be if you fall behind or you forget to do an assignment. So make sure you don't fall behind and you don't forget to turn in an assignment. Okay. So we're going to repeat this schedule, this reading and quiz schedule. This will make sure that we're staying on track with the readings and retaining a lot of important information in cognitive science. This is important not just for the purpose of memorizing facts, but even more importantly, is we need to have a grasp of enough background literature in order to begin doing our own work. Like, I can't come up with a new experiment or come up with new ideas, even theoretically, if I don't have a grasp of enough content first, right? So in order to not just do well on your quizzes, but in order to prepare for your final paper and presentation, it's going to be very helpful for you to stay on track with the reading assignments. As you do more reading and more pieces of this puzzle about the mind start to fit together, you're going to start seeing opportunities for research or projects that you might be interested in pursuing. Okay, so on the one hand, we're doing regular quizzes to make sure that we're getting a breadth requirement and we're all learning some basic facts about cognitive science. But the purpose is also, on the other hand, to equip you with sufficient background knowledge so that way you can carry out a nice research paper, independent paper, and presentation by the end of the course. Okay. Notice here that the final paper and presentation, they're due 11:59 p.m. on June 29th. Okay, so this is the day before our last day of class. Okay, so what I want you to do is knock out the paper by this day, the 29th, so that way on the 30th, you can focus on completing your final quiz. Okay, you're gonna need that last 2 days, the last 2 days of the summer session to complete your take-home quiz. Okay, or else you're just going to be overwhelmed with a paper, presentation, and quiz. Okay, so that's why the paper and presentation due June 29th, 11:59 p.m. Okay. If you have any questions or concerns about the paper, please feel free to set up a Zoom meeting with me and we can talk through the issues. And just to reinforce this point, even though the course is asynchronous this summer session, I'm still happy to meet with you and be available for you over Zoom so we can talk through your issues. Okay. All right, now that we have an overview of the course schedule, in this next reading schedule, I've provided more specific details of what we're reading on each day. Okay, and notice that we tend to read 2 articles per meeting just because we're moving at twice the speed over the summer session. Usually, if this was over the fall or the spring, we cover 1 major article per meeting. Okay, but summer, we're covering 2. Okay. These are the titles of the articles. So here I've sort of provided what I think is a helpful description for the meeting overall, right? Like syntax, that's a nice brief way to cover June 1st material. But then you'll notice that in June 1st, like the title of the program that we're going to be using is called Syntactic Tree Diagrams, okay? The articles we'll be reading for June 2nd will be literal meaning and what is the speech act. Okay, so this is the list of readings that we're going to cover lecture by lecture. Okay, and then after the title of the article, I've provided the author name as well as the year. And if you click on that, it'll take you to the link, the external link where you can find it online. Sometimes that's helpful because if you want to find other articles that are related to this article, right? So say you're interested in this article by Kenrick about evolutionary psychology, cognitive science, and dynamical systems. Well, awesome. Just click on this link. It'll take you to the site online. And on the site online, off to the side, it'll usually have lists of related articles, right? So you can click on those other articles and continue your research on this topic, okay? All right, so this is pretty self-explanatory. I've curated or selected a lot of awesome articles for you. Cognitive science, since it's interdisciplinary in nature, right? We're drawing upon tools from anthropology, psychology, neuroscience, linguistics, philosophy, artificial intelligence, and education, right? It can sometimes become too loose, right? We can lose focus on a target. So what I've done in this course for us to stay focused on what cognitive science is, rather than us just sort of shuffling through random subdisciplines, is we're going to think about language in particular, right? Language is one of the sort of paradigm components to higher level cognition. So by us thinking about language, the role of language in cognition in particular, it'll help provide us with a focal topic in which we can now bring all these tools to bear, right? Now we can look at research from linguistic anthropology. We can look at research from the philosophy of language. We can look at research from natural language processing, right? And now we see that if we have a focal topic like language, we can now bring the fields together to focus on that topic, okay? So although it's possible in cognitive science to focus on other topics, we're gonna focus this session on language as our focal topic, okay? And we won't focus exclusively on language. We'll also cover some other topics, some very fascinating topics. For example, emotions and facial expressions, right? Language is very, cognitive. We'll also consider the emotions and the role of the emotions with cognition. And we'll also look at some other interesting ideas like consciousness, the role of language in consciousness, and many very fascinating topics, as many as I felt we could cram into this session. Okay. So we're going to spend enough time covering these different subdisciplines. We're going to start off with these sort of introductory articles. We'll look at some articles that motivate the discussion in cognitive science from language. Language is very rule-based, and we can use language to generate novel sentences that we've never produced or heard before. And so it raises a very interesting question. And how are we able to do that? What about our cognitive ability makes it such that I can give a lecture, and a lecture that I've never given before, and you're able to understand this lecture, which you've never heard before, right? Clearly, this is not based off pure memorization of other words and utterances you've heard before, but there's something about the rules of putting words and sentences together that help us generate new sentences and understand new sentences, okay? So we're gonna look at language and marvel at its generative capacity, its artistic capacity, the role it plays in our cognition of facts, as well as our cognition of fiction, the future, many interesting things. I'll make the case throughout the semester that language is one of the most interesting aspects of human mental life, okay? As we progress, we'll also consider the neuroscience of language. This will give us an opportunity to understand the major components of the brain. We will also think about the role of the brain within the context of human evolution. And then we'll also think about how we can better understand cognition, not simply by studying the human brain, but also better understanding cognition and intelligent systems by building those things, right? Or building instances of intelligent systems, right? One way we can better understand a system is by empirically examining it. Another way is by trying to build such systems ourselves, right? Like simpler toy models, if you will. Okay, so we'll also, towards the end of the course, look at attempts to build computational systems, in particular, artificial intelligence, all right? And there was a lot I wanted to cover, but for the sake of time, we're gonna focus on Turing machines and artificial neural networks, okay? Although if we were over a normal session, like the fall or the spring, I would fit Bayesian networks in there too, okay? But rather than covering Bayesian networks, cramming it into our last lecture on June 30th, I thought it would be more productive to take a day to look back at all we've covered and sort of summarize and tie things together. Okay, so June 30th is going to be our last day, and we're going to summarize everything that we've learned. All the primary reading material is provided for you here on this list. All right, and that covers the syllabus, okay? Just to point out, you have one quiz pass, so although there will be quizzes every week, you can take 1 week off and not worry about completing a quiz for that week, okay? The reason that I did that is to allow you to have more time to focus on preparing your final paper and your final presentation. Okay, so maybe you take, for example, the quiz for week 1, the quiz for week 2, but then you find something that you really are interested in and you want to start working on your paper and presentation. Then you might choose to take week 3 off from your quiz and really knock out your paper and presentation, and then jump back on the quiz for week 4, 5, and 6. Okay, or another approach is you can attempt every quiz and just feel comfortable in the fact that I'll drop your lowest quiz score, okay? So you have an option on how you want to use your quiz pass, either just purposely use your time for your final paper and presentation, or do your best on every quiz and know that I'll replace your lowest grade, okay? Or drop your lowest score, okay? And any questions about this, please feel free to peruse this syllabus. Very important that you read through this, okay? All right, Now that we are familiar with the syllabus, your primary readings, like where are all the articles that you have to read? Do you have to purchase them? No, you don't. Okay, there's nothing that you need to purchase for the course. I've provided all the course material for you. Okay, so all the articles that you need to read for the course, all the assigned readings are available here. So just go to the primary readings and you can find all the articles here. So for example, bars, click on that and it'll open up the article for global workspace theory of consciousness. Now that you know where the primary readings are, the assigned readings, let's look at the questions that go with your reading. So if you click on the folder reading questions, you'll see that I've uploaded the folder for week 1 reading questions. So click on this folder and you'll see that these are the assigned readings for the first week. And if you click on, so for example, tomorrow we're going to read Thagard 1996 as well as Kenrick 2001. Right? So before you read the article Thagard 1996, read the questions and see what questions I'm asking you. Okay. Some of these are going to have more questions than others. Like this Thagard article is a simple introduction. I don't have too many questions for you. So here you see I have 2 questions for you. Okay. The questions are in blue and the answers, where the answers would go, or answer options, are in red. Okay. So you know, I got 2 questions here, right? And I'm asking you essentially, right, this scholar argued that language acquisition cannot occur based on learned habits, but instead requires a universal mental grammar of rules, consisting of rules. Which scholar believes this? Is it Skinner, Chomsky, Marr, or Tomasello? Okay. Then you have your next question. This is the hypothesis that thinking occurs in a mental language. What's this hypothesis? Language of thought hypothesis, native language magnet hypothesis, or the Sapir-Whorf hypothesis. Okay. And with these questions in mind, now you have a clear task at hand. Read through the articles and 1, look for anything that's of general interest to you, like, I might want to work on this topic. And 2, try to find the answers to these questions, okay? Because a subset of these questions are going to be on your quiz at the end of the week, okay? So no problem, the Thagard's easy. Next set of questions from Kenrick. So click on that. And you'll see that there's a few more questions here. There's 4 questions here. And read the questions first, then go to the assigned readings and read the reading. And as you read through the assigned reading, complete the answers to these questions. Then hold all the answers to your questions. Then by the end of the week, you can use that to help you complete your take-home quiz. Okay. The take-home quiz, the important thing is not that you memorize a bunch of facts about the brain and the mind, but rather that you develop research skills and that you generate or you develop a good sense of what's going on. Okay. All right. And then after Tuesday, the next lecture is going to be on Wednesday, and that's going to be Berkeley. And you'll see now I'm going to start asking you a little bit more questions. And these are the questions that I want you to be able to answer from Berkeley's study. Okay. And so on. Okay. And then after you've answered all the questions for week 1, right, now you can feel confident that you're ready for your quiz. Okay. There's no tricks, or I'm not going to throw anything crazy on your quiz. My goal is not to trick you, but just to make sure that you're keeping up and you're doing your work. Okay. So that's what I'm going to do. Every week, I'm going to release the next batch of questions for the week. Use that to help you pay attention and to digest the articles and to do well on your quizzes at the end of the week. Okay. Awesome. So now you have a method to get A's on all your quizzes. Like, how awesome is that? The only thing you have to worry about now, or think about now, is how do you knock out your final paper and your final presentation? Well, I'm going to show you right now. Okay, so go to resources. And so far, I've just posted these two resources, but I'll post some more shortly. First is suggested study strategies. I think that this is very helpful. And you'll see that here, I've explained sort of like how to approach the readings and the quizzes. And I sort of just talked you through it just now, so I won't go through step by step, okay? But if my discussion right now is a little bit quick, or you will grasp it better by reading it, go ahead and read this file on suggested study strategies, okay? I also have here suggestions for doing really well on your final paper and presentation, okay? And go ahead and read through this, okay? Essentially here, I break down the 3 parts of your paper, which I'll just sort of skip down here so you can see it more conveniently, right? Your final paper and presentation are going to be on the same content. There's just going to be slightly different requirements for the paper and the presentation, right? There's going to be a word length requirement for the paper and a time length requirement for the presentation, for example, okay? But the structure of these items will be the same, okay? And it mirrors the structure of how we do science, okay? Especially in the mind sciences and cognitive science, okay? The first thing that we see in all papers, in all research reports, and also the first thing that you're going to provide in your paper is a review of the foundational material, okay? For the course in your paper, your part 1 is going to cover a review of course material, okay? So part 1 of your paper and presentation, you're going to cover, for example, the article by Berkeley, right? The article by Berkeley, which we're going to cover this week, is a nice article about how children learn rules for English morphology. Okay, so for part 1 of your presentation and paper, you might discuss the assigned reading on Berkeley. Okay, so in part 1, I might say, for part 1 of my presentation, I was really interested in the article by Berkeley that we covered in class on this particular day, right? In that study by Berkeley, the objective was this. The methods used was blah, 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 right? And the results that were found was so-and-so, okay? So just provide a background discussion of what we covered in class. This will, 1, demonstrate to me that you attended class and you did the assigned reading and that you mastered the assigned reading, but also 2, this will serve as a springboard for your part 2, which is your independent research, okay? So we always want to do our new thing on the basis of what has been done before, okay? So part 1, review course content. Part 2, use Google Scholar to find additional related research, right? That was not assigned for the course reading, okay? So I discussed in here, I gave an example, you might Google English morphology and children and find another article that pops up on Google Scholar. And then in here, I included an example from Selby's article on English morphology. So for my part 2, I might now discuss that article in some detail, okay? So that my transition from part 1 to part 2 would be something like, now that I've discussed, I reviewed content from the course on how children learn English morphology. For part 2, I wanted to discuss some independent research that I did using Google Scholar that resulted in me finding 3 additional articles on how children learn English morphology, okay? And then in part 2 of my presentation, I might discuss 1 or 2 articles that cover that topic in further detail, okay? So for part 2, it's going to be very similar in structure or an approach to part 1. It's just going to be covering articles that were not assigned in class, okay? So in part 2, you're just going to discuss, review the main objectives, methods, and results from the additional articles that you found using Google Scholar, okay? So parts 1 and part 2 of your paper and presentation is reviewing course content, part 1, and independent research, part 2. Okay, the final part of your presentation and paper, your part 3, is going to offer some thoughtful assessment of that work that you reviewed in parts 1 and part 2, as well as possibly detailed suggestions for future work. Okay, your part 3 is going to be a little bit more open-ended or up to you, in that if you're focusing on a philosophical part of the course, your part 3 may consist of new philosophical arguments that were not covered or considered in the articles that you reviewed for parts 1 and 2, right? So if you're doing a philosophical topic, you might discuss like an argument from Searle and an opposing argument, right, from someone that challenges Searle. And then in your conclusion, right, since you're discussing, you're just explaining the actual arguments as provided by Searle and others in parts 1 and 2, in part 3, you would offer your assessment of those arguments and potentially offer your own original arguments, as well as a final assessment of which view is the most convincing to you. Okay, so you notice that in part 1 and part 2, you're offering more of like a factual review of the literature. Like you can actually do this poorly, right? You can get this wrong. Like I might say in Chomsky, he offered an argument against nativism, right? And I can be wrong about that. I can be wrong about my review of the literature. In part 3, you're offering more of your own original idea, right? And part 3, we're not focused so much on being right or wrong, but doing a better or worse job, right? And what I mean by that is in your part 3, you can do a better job of drawing upon resources or methods and results from parts 1 and 2 and using that to discuss a new article, right? For example, if I want to do an incredibly good job in part 3 of my presentation, I might detail a new experiment that I want to do that is drawn upon the approach of Berkeley and Selby. Okay, so if I'm doing a review of empirical literature rather than philosophical literature, then parts 1 and 2 may be a review of the empirical approaches and the results. And then in part 3, I would explain how I'm drawing upon those empirical approaches and perhaps modifying something. Like, for example, Berkeley's study was on English syntax or English morphology. In my study, I might explain, right, how I want to use the similar approach, the same experimental design as Berkeley, but instead of focusing on English morphology, I'll focus on French morphology or Korean morphology, right? Here you see that the hypothesis is still the same and the techniques are still the same, but I've systematically modified a part of the experiment from previous work so I can see if I get a new result, right, that pops out of that, right? By hypothesis, right, we should get similar results if we just change like the stimuli, right? Because the hypothesis from Berkeley has to do with language learning in general, right? And that means for children of English, children that learn English, children that learn French, children that learn Korean, children that learn sign languages, right? So you see by reading an article for part 1 on English morphology, and then maybe for my part 2, I did some research on like Spanish morphology and sign language morphology. You see, now I'm getting enough pieces that for my part 3, I can explain how I can tinker or draw upon that previous work to systematically produce a new study and have a hypothesis for what I reasonably expect to get out of that new study, okay? And what I'm looking for part 3 is just sort of like effort and seeing like how well you're drawing upon previous work and trying to outline something new, right? Of course, we don't have time to carry out these actual studies, so I'm not looking for whether you are getting a result or whatnot, right? I'm just sort of seeing how well you're trying to do something synthetic and generative with your thoughts from the course rather than just purely repetitive or regurgitative. Okay. So that's the main idea for your final paper and presentation. There's 3 parts to it that mirror the parts of articles, right? Review of the literature, an outline of what you're going to do in the paper, like a methods section, and then the results. And so you're doing something similar in this paper. And the purpose of this is to help you understand how to write your own research papers and produce your own publication presentations for conferences and whatnot. Excuse me. Paper requirements, somewhere in between 2,000 to 5,000 words, 2 to 6 citations roughly, and make sure that your turn-in similarity score is 9% or less. Okay. If your turn-in similarity score is higher than 9%, then rewrite portions of the essay so that way it's 9% or less. Okay, so for example, if you upload your paper, you turn in your paper like 2 days early, which I recommend, this will give you time to check out your score in advance, and then you'll have time to maybe remove a quote, a long quote, rephrase a couple sentences, do what you need to do so that way you get that plagiarism detection score down to a reasonable percentage. Okay. And I don't care how many times you have to re-upload your paper. I just care that the final attempt is before the deadline. Okay. So if you want to a week before start uploading and revising your paper, by all means go for it. I'm not going to look at how many times you've attempted to upload your paper. Okay. Your presentation requirement, I don't have a length requirement. I just have a time requirement. So I want you to film yourself presenting your research, record yourself on your phone, over Zoom, over YouTube, any way that you can, right? And just make sure that your presentation is somewhere between 12 to 15 minutes. This is about how much time you're gonna have at a conference. So just practice getting your topic within this time frame, okay? Don't try to just talk your paper into a presentation, or your presentation is going to be way too long. Okay. What you need to do for your presentation is focus on satisfying the requirements, right? Like make sure that you do parts 1, 2, and 3, but also concision, right? Making sure that you hit each point concisely and clearly. Okay. All right, and then here, this last sentence is just make sure that you are punctual. As I say, summer sessions move very quickly. I don't anticipate anyone failing the course as long as you do all your assignments, okay? I just have to reemphasize, make sure you turn in all your work on time, okay? The quizzes have a deadline, a firm deadline that cannot be moved, because after the deadline, I have a grader, an automatic grader that will produce a grade for you and also show you the correct results like immediately after. Okay, this way you can check your work and understand what you missed and why you missed it, right? So given that the correct answers are provided to you right after the deadline, it's not possible to take any of the quizzes after the deadline. Okay, so make sure that you do all your work punctually and that you don't run into any situations. If you anticipate a situation, let me know in advance. There may be occasions where I can push an assignment a few days, like maybe a quiz, I can push it a day or two later. But whenever I do that for the class overall, right? So this has to be a class level action rather than an individual level action. And that's to make sure that grading is fair for everybody in the class, right? It's just not fair if, for example, I make everyone else only have like 1 week to do an assignment, but for this person, they get 3 weeks or a year to do it, right? It's not fair. So, right, it's not that I don't care about you and I don't want you to do well. It's actually because I must grade everyone fairly. That's very important for me. If you're familiar with any of my academic work, like issues of justice and social issues like that are very important to me. So grading fairly is super important to me. Okay. So anyone runs into an issue, let me know in advance so I can potentially move things for everybody and not just for this person or that person. Okay. All right. Next is, as you write your paper, you're going to need to cite sources, right? You need at least to cite one source for part 1 and cite at least one source for part 2. So the minimum number of sources is 2. Your part 2, when you do your independent research, it's likely going to include more than 2 sources, perhaps 3, right? So you may have maybe like 5 sources to cite. So here I've provided a guideline and a sample for how to cite your sources. Okay, there's a nice style guideline for the APA here at this link, so you can click on that for more general information. And then here I've provided examples for how to cite your sources in a reference list. So like this at the end of your paper. And here you see there's different types of sources. So if you're citing a dissertation, right, this is how you cite the dissertation. This is a book, right? So that's how you cite a book. This is a conference presentation. This is just a single author article. This is a single author book chapter. So it's just a little bit different. Here is 3 authors, so multi-author citation. This is single author audio file, double author journal article. This is single author video file, multiple author journal article, and then finally a single author video file off of YouTube. Okay, so wherever you find your materials, this should help you figure out how to cite that type of source. And then here I've provided examples for how to cite these types of sources in text. Okay, so this is how you cite your sources at the end of your article, and this is how you cite your sources in text. So you might say something like, Kroom 2011 argued that something, blah, 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 right? And I just put P for whatever proposition, okay? And then just notice that theses or books are gonna use slightly different pagination styles. So like a book chapter will be like PP, journal article will be a single P, and just sort of, you can use this as a model for how to cite your sources, okay? All right. Next, we're almost there. Supplemental readings. So here, there's so much great work in cognitive science, right? You could spend a lifetime reading all of this material. So what I've done is I've just provided some additional resources in this supplementary readings file section. And you may draw upon these for your part 2, right? So I don't want to assign Harnad 1990 as an assigned reading, but if you're really interested in like the Chinese room argument from Searle and sort of like that type of research, then you might read this article and use it as a source for your part 2, okay? So this is just, I'm gonna populate this section with more interesting articles, but this is just to help you with your own independent research, as well as just, I think, some really awesome material to read, right? Like if you read this 1965 book, Aspects of the Theory of Syntax, it's going to really help you understand what was going on with cognitive science in the 1950s, okay, and why it was so influential, okay? So knock yourselves out and peruse these materials, okay? And now that we've looked, last but not least, lecture slides. So what I'm going to do is, along with each recorded presentation that I post, I'm going to upload the slides for that presentation in this file section, okay? So we just went through the first slides for lecture 0, which is this lecture. And, if you want to review the slides for today, you can just go here and read the slides. Okay. And I will upload, right? There's going to be slides for each lecture. Okay. And I will probably even break them down even further, like at a sub lecture level, so that there's distinct slides for each reading. Okay. So in order to answer your questions on the quiz, refer to your notes, refer to the primary articles, and refer to my lecture slides. And you'll have no problems getting all the questions right on your quiz. Okay. So that covers our welcome and introduction to the course for this summer session. I hope you found the lecture useful, and I'm really looking forward to working with you throughout the summer. If you need anything, just send me an email at croom@berkeley.edu. Have a great evening, and I look forward to seeing you tomorrow for our next lecture.